This is a case in which the 2025 Act has been framed, Mullah, for the purposes of protection of waqfs. But in reality, it is designed to capture waqfs through a process which is non-judicial, through a process which is executive, through a process in which those to whom this property belongs, because waqf can't be created without, except through private properties owned by the individual concerned. So private properties are being taken away only because there is some dispute. We don't know what the nature of the dispute is. And when that dispute happens, Mullahs, a person is appointed who is higher than the collector, and that person will decide the dispute on his own. He will give a report, but by the time, Mullahs, that report is given, we don't know have the time frame. And within that, Mullahs, while that report is pending, the waqf property is taken away. And
taken away without following due process?
Yes, and without following any procedure. I'll demonstrate all that to your lordships. Taken away with the Mullahs, the dispute is whether this is government property or my property. He will decide that. He is a nominee of the government, Mullahs, who is higher than the collector. So the government decides its own dispute without any judicial procedure. And while that dispute is pending, while that report is pending, the property is taken away. It is no longer waqf property. And there is no procedure. And anybody can create a dispute. So this is one aspect of the matter, which is in the context of what I say, it was designed to take over and capture waqf properties. That's number one. Number two, Mullahs, what is a waqf? A waqf, Mullahs, is an endowment to Allah, to God. A dedication to Allah, to God. And that, pursuant to that dedication, that property can't be dealt with in terms of transfer. You can't transfer that property to anybody. Once a waqf is always a waqf. That's the very concept of a waqf, Mullahs. In other words, if I have, Mullahs, in fact, dedicated my piece of property, because I cannot dedicate somebody else's piece of property. And the historical reason behind it, let me just tell your lordships that, is that, as your lordship knows, under our constitution, Mullahs, the state cannot possibly finance religious institutions. Cannot finance, Mullahs. If there's a mosque, Mullahs, the state cannot finance it for its upkeep. If, Mullahs, there is a burial ground, this has to be created through private property. So what happens is, Mullahs, that people at the end of their lives, Mullahs, give their private property dedicated to God, so that those who come later, Mullahs, can take advantage of that property. There are no earnings there, Mullahs. If you go to a burial ground, Mullahs, nobody earns. People come to bury their dead bodies, Mullahs, and they charge a certain amount through which they maintain that. If you go to a mosque, Mullahs, there's not a chadhawa, Mullahs, like in temples. They don't have 1,000 crores, 2,000 crores, 3,000 crores, Mullahs. There are no chadhawas in mosques. So those have to be maintained. And how are they going to be maintained? Through the kind of monies that we collect through processes, Mullahs, of charity. That's all.
That happens in other religions also. When temples are...
No, but temples, Mullahs, people give, as your lordship knows, Mullahs, there are chadhawas that are given, Mullahs, and temples are, in terms of, Mullahs,
but even in the...
mosque?
I visit dargahs also, I visit churches also, everybody...
Dargahs and mosques Dargahs and mosques are different. Dargahs and mosques are I'm talking about a mosque, Mullahs. Your lordship is right. On dargah, it's different. But I'm talking about mosques. So what I was trying to say was, Mullahs, the ways to preserve these properties is through these kind of efforts that are made by the community. Right? Now, Mullahs, what they say is that if anybody, supposing an encroacher creates a dispute, that property will lose its character as waqf property as long as the dispute is pending. This is what the Act says. So you have a situation, Mullahs, where actually there was a waqf act. You just note this, Mullahs. There was a waqf act of 2013. 2013. Will you allow me? 2013, then, 1913, 1923, 1913, 1923,
First is 1923.
1913, 1913. 1913, then 1923, then 1913,
1913, 1913.
1913, then 1923, then 1954, then 1984, then 1995, then 2013 and 2025. This is Mullad's, the history of it.
Sequence.
Yes.
Just factually, 84 and 2013 are amendments, not the.
No, I'm talking about the act.
Yes.
Correct? So, Mullah, therefore, and I will demonstrate to your lordships that the 2025 Act is a complete departure from the past. I tell your lordships how. There are two concepts in law called waqf by user and a dedication which is made. Right. If you give a dedication, Mullahs, and you pass away, and that property is used, Mullahs, for the purposes of the dedication, it becomes a waqf by user. And it's perpetuity. That's the concept of waqf. Once a waqf, always a waqf. Correct, Mullahs? Now that waqf by user has been done away. A concept that is recognized in the Babri Masjid case, saying waqf by user is a practice, a religious practice, that has continued for hundreds of years. That's the five-judge bench, Mullahs. And whether it's a waqf by user or not is a matter of evidence. But they've done away with it. How have they done away with it? They say that in the 1913 Act, the 1923 Act, the 1954 Act, and the later acts, there was a requirement for registration. And because you did not register, Mullahs, therefore, any waqf which is not registered will not be regarded as waqf. So many of these waqfs by users were created 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 200 years ago, Mullahs, 500 years ago. Where will you
But
get
is
them?
it a matter of fact that under those enactments, 1913, 1923 and so on, is there a requirement for registration?
There was.
So is it a mandatory or
It will, no, they shall be registered, they said. But Mullahs, the consequences of non-registration were not set up in the Act. The consequences of non-registration, this is the first time in the 2025.
I have not gone through anything because I had,
You know, that's why, Mullahs, I'm broadly telling your lordships what my submissions are going to be.
I have not gone through. I'll be frank, so you'll have to start from ABCD.
Yes,
Just as a matter of information, as whether under the old act,
yes.
the provision was for registration was mandatory or directly?
The expression used was shall.
Merely using shall may not make it mandatory.
Correct.
Were there any consequences provided in those acts for non-registration? If consequences are provided, then it will be mandatory. Whether word shall is used or not.
No, Mullahs, the consequences were not that it will not be regarded as a waqf. That was never the consequence.
Was there anything that on account of registration of a particular?
You won't be regarded as, no,
Something
that's-
will happen.
no, there's no consequence that you will not be regarded as a waqf.
We-
It will continue as a waqf.
But there were consequences.
No, not this consequence.
No, but
No,
there
no,
were
no,
For
other
the caretaker, there may be consequences, but not this.
We will record your submission
Yes, please.
that though under the old act, there were requirement for registration, but they were not mandatory because the consequences for non-registration were not provided under those acts.
For the purposes of deciding,
On account of non-registration,
yes,
nothing was to be happened.
yes,
Like suppose if there is under certain act, mandatory duty is there. You have to do such and such thing within a particular period.
correct.
And if you don't do that, then you will be required to pay 1,000 rupees fine or 1 lakh rupees fine. So no such provision is there.
No, the only thing was, Mullahs, that the act said that the mutawalli who has not done it is made culpable. That's all. He loses his right to continue as a mutawalli.
That's all. There
So
was,
that's all. That I said to your lordships, and I stand by that. There were no consequences provided that it will no longer be regarded as waqf.
no,
Which is
no other consequences were there.
no other consequences. Which is why the 2025 takes that away.
So we,
Therefore, it's a complete departure.
so do we record that?
Yes, your lordships may record it. It's a complete departure from the
No, that
19
under the 2013, sorry, 1913. Till what was the last one, 1913 till 2013?
till 2013. The status of the Waqf,
2013,
yeah,
though,
the status and character of the Waqf.
no, though
continue.
there was a provision
Yes,
for registration of
yes, yes,
a work.
yes.
No consequences were provided.
Right.
Were provided for non-compliance,
Right.
except removal of a mutawalli.
Correct, because he was to be, he is responsible for registration of the Waqf.
So they except removal of a mutawalli,
Yes. Consequences que the mutawalli.
not a trust, not a work.
Ah, correct. Well, that's for the community, Malat. So because he did not register, he will suffer the consequences, but the character of the Waqf will not change and cannot. This changes it. I'm just giving you lordships broadly. This changes the character of the Waqf. It says if you're not registered under these acts, then you're no longer Waqf. That's number one. Number two, if you have to, if you are a Waqf by user, you must tell us as to who is the one who established the Waqf. Well, how do we know? If it is established 200 years ago, how will anybody tell you today who established it? Because there was no registration at that point in time. They were user. That is why Waqf by user is a matter of evidence held by the Constitution bench of this court.
1913 to 2013.
Yes. Well, that's 23 was the first one actually.
Whether during 1913 to 2013,
Yeah.
registration was not necessary insofar as work by user is concerned.
Yes, yes. They have now removed it completely.
Was it permissible under the?
Yes,
Code
yes,
Act?
yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, throughout, Manoj, otherwise I wouldn't be making this submission. Works by user, this is established practice, recognized by
Yeah, so
the Constitution bench of this court.
second submission is that prior to 2025, work by user was not required to be registered.
What happened was, Manoj, in 1954, for the first time, there was a requirement of registration as such. Otherwise, 23. Yes. मैं कह रहा हूँ यार तुम बता रहे हो गलत बोल रहे हो।
We had been participating in the
Your
JPC
lordships are dealing with.
We can only make a request to your lordship, my lord.
because this is a very important
One.
point, my lord, which was
Lord,
not
the-
argued before your lordship. My lord,
Concept,
that is why I wanted to place it before your
my
lordship.
lord, concept of
Wait,
wakaf
wait, please.
by user, my lord, on the religious lines, my lord, has not been, my lord, fully, my lord,
Sir,
elaborated.
please Don't do this. This is not done. Please, sir, I'm requesting you.
No, please, I'm just addressing to the court.
No, I
I'm
understand.
taking, I need not to take a permission from you. I
They have said no yesterday, we will not hear anybody.
I reserve my, your lordship may grant me.
My lord, before the learned,
Sorry, Mr.
permission only I'm asking.
Sorry.
Lord, this is with regard to the JPC. We
Sorry.
If your lordship looks into our affidavit, that is enough, my lord. Our rejoinder have made it very clear.
We'll read it.
Joint parliamentary committee, my lord, was
Yes,
not
yesterday
taken
said,
into consideration.
Mr. Wilson, yesterday you have said that we will not hear anybody.
Yes, my lord. My lord, two things,
Yes.
not only JPC, my lord.
Lord, kindly
Yes,
see.
yes.
Early morning, the bill was
Very difficult to work here.
obliged, my lord, obliged.
There is no discipline, no respect for the court. Really difficult court. Yes.
Lord, please. My lord, your lordships have before your lordships, my lord, petitions filed by individuals. Mostly, my lord, 99% in a public interest litigation and not by any affected individual. And that would, my lord, make the difference because your lordships are dealing with an enactment which is passed by the legislature whose competence is not in question. It's nobody's case that the parliament did not have the legislative competence to pass this law. Because this is one of the factors which is the possible only factor where stay of a statute is granted or something at that threshold that this legislature had no competence to enact the law. Now, my lord, I will just briefly point out to your lordships, my lord, what was the process, a detailed process which was undertaken, my lord, before the Joint Parliamentary Committee. I'll not read anything, but please, my lord, take my note and please come to page 9. I'm sorry, take my affidavit and come to page 9. My counter, my lord. Lord, counter. Lord, this is not a case where the ministry prepares a bill, it comes before the house, voting takes place mechanically, and the bill is passed. My lord, we were eradicating the menace which was noticed as back as in the year 1923, 102 years back. And therefore, my lord, we were very careful that each and every stakeholder is consulted, each and every voice is heard, and thereafter it goes before the parliament and a full-fledged debate takes place. Lord, please have a look at page 9, Lord, at para 21. Lord, this I would request your lordships to bear in mind, because it is my case that few of the petitioners cannot claim to represent the entire Muslim community. We received 97,000 representations. No, I'm sorry, 97 lakh representations. The Joint Parliamentary Committee had 36 sittings. Please come to page 9, para 21. Apart from the representations received by the Joint Parliamentary Committee, the Ministry of Minority Affairs also received representations. I'm sorry, my lord, my counter. Page 9, para 21.
We have,
I'll be very brief and crisp. my lord. Apart from the representations received by the Joint Parliamentary Committee, the Ministry of Minority Affairs also received representations highlighting the need for legislative amendments which include mismanagement of work properties, deliberate encroachment and unlawful transfer of work land, inefficient functioning of work tribunals, sweeping powers to arbitrarily declare property as waqf as per section 40 of the Act, allegations against Waqf board officials along with general grievances and representation from Ahmadiyya community. This is a schedule, a very backward community amongst Muslims. Now, my lord, I'm not reading para 23. These are the state governments who were consulted. They came through their representatives. Then, my lord, page 11, para 24. My lord, 25 Waqf boards were consulted. Consulted means they came, they gave their representations. There were deliberations with the Joint Parliamentary Committee. Clause by clause, and Joint Parliamentary Committee records that on this particular clause of bill, A board has this objection, B has this suggestion, C is agreeing, whatever. I'm not giving examples. Now, please see, my lord, page 12. We took inputs in personal meetings. We means the JPC with, my lord, these institutions, my lord, 28. I'm not, my lord, repeating. All India Sunni Jamaat-e-Ulema, Indian Muslim Civil Rights, Uttar Pradesh Sunni Central Waqf Board, etc., etc. Lord, thereafter, Lord, a voluminous report was prepared where some suggestions by the stakeholders were accepted, some suggestions were not accepted, and they have given reasons why suggestions are either accepted or not accepted. When suggestions were made to amend some sections that it is not a part of the bill, please make it a part of the bill. Lord, the committee suggested that it should be made a part of the bill. And that bill was presented before the competent legislature and passed with, Lord, unprecedented debate. Now, your lordships, my lord, kindly come to my lord note. Lord, I have filed a note, my lord. I'll take your lordships one by one. One section after the other, my lord, which were under challenge. My note is confined to 3 issues, but I'll answer all issues, my lord, which were raised. Your lordships have my note. My lord, kindly come to page 4. 3R is quoted, my lord. 1954 Act again said only a Muslim can create a waqf. 1995 Act also said only a Muslim can create a waqf. Now a very interesting amendment comes, my lord, in 2013, which came to be passed in November 2013. Incidentally, my lord, few months before the country was to go for general elections in March 14, where the inclusion was not Muslim, any person can create a waqf. Bear this in mind, my lord, and I'll come to, my lord, why this was done away with. Now, waqf means the permanent dedication, now amended, green is amended. Any person showing or demonstrating that he is practicing Islam for at least 5 years of any movable or immovable property, having ownership of such property, and that there is no contrivance involved in the dedication of such property. Well, three things. A, he has to be Muslim. B, he has to be a Muslim practicing Islam for 5 years. And three, most important, he can create a waqf of the property he owns. He cannot create waqf on somebody else's property. This is to, my lord, eradicate the menace of encroachment of private or government property. Now, please see, my lord, this has a saving clause. I'll come to, my lord, justification on each of them. Please see the last. My lord, one more thing which we have added. My lord, just, my lord, a good thing, positive thing, my lord. Earlier, my lord, there is a concept of waqf al-aulad. Waqf al-aulad means that it's dedication of property to Allah, but for the benefit of my children. The children initially, till this amendment came, did not include daughters, widows, etc. This is introduced for the first time, not under challenge, fortunately. Now, please see, my lord, proviso. Provided that existing waqf by user properties registered on or before the commencement of the Waqf Amendment Act 25 as waqf by user will remain as waqf properties. My lord, kindly pause here for a minute. This is a prospectively applicable provision. If you have registered yourself as waqf by user, then it is said with two exceptions. Except that the property wholly or in part is in dispute. Lord, kindly pause here for a minute. I have not clarified in the affidavit that dispute would mean a private party may have a dispute with the property of the waqf. My lord, I as a private individual, a citizen, may have filed a suit that this is my property which somebody has declared as a waqf. That would be governed by the judicial adjudication, what the court will ultimately adjudicate upon. Lord, I don't think there can be any objection to this. If there is a dispute between private parties and a waqf with regard to the waqf property, it would not be a waqf because it would be governed by the adjudication of the competent court. Second, is in dispute or is a government property. Lord, kindly appreciate, my lords. Waqf, we are dealing with waqf by user. Lord, first category of waqf is I have a property, I dedicate it to the Allah for a particular reason, my lord. It can be for a mosque, it can be for school, it can be for hospital, it can be for musafir khana, it can be for yatim khana, several, because they say religious, charitable or pious purpose. Nobody has a right over the government land, because the government being the owner of the land would mean the entire country is the owner of the land and the government holds the land in trust for and on behalf of each and every citizen. Number one. Number two, Waqf by user. So there are judgments that the government, even in case of a Waqf, that government can protect its property if it is declared to be a Waqf. There is a Supreme Court judgment. I will not cite one paragraph from that. Lord, secondly, Lord, when we say Waqf by user, by definition, the property belongs to someone else. You have acquired right by continuous use. I hope I'm clear, my lords. Waqf other than Waqf by user, my property, I dedicate it to Allah, my lord, and it becomes a Waqf. But Waqf by user, by definition, means by long usage, it acquires the property, it acquires the character of a Waqf, and therefore necessarily either a private property is used for a long period or a government property is used for a long period. Now, my lord, the question is how to decide whether this is a government land or not. Well, for the time being, my lord, forget Waqf by user. But suppose there is a building standing on the property, which, my lord, can be a government property. It can be a residential building, it can be an industrial building, it can be a temple, it can be anything. The question I'm posing to myself is, my lord, can the government not examine that whether this property belongs to the government I'm holding in trust for and on behalf of 140 crore citizens or not? Lord, that is provided for in 3C, which your lordship put.
That is what their condition is,
Yes,
that maybe an officer above the collector.
correct, ma'am.
So he-
I'll answer that, ma'am.
He is a government officer.
Yes, ma'am.
So government deciding its own claim
So I'll answer that.
And-
I'm conscious.
and given a finality to that.
My lord, that is where I may say, my lord, with the sense of responsibility, it was not only just misleading argument, no, it was a false argument, and I'll demonstrate that. My lord, what happens, my lord, when a revenue correction process starts, revenue records are being corrected, the revenue authorities decide whether it is a government land or not. But revenue authorities decide only for the purpose of revenue records and correction of records. They cannot decide the title. I'll come to that, my lord. I'll satisfy your lordships. And it is not final. My lord, repeatedly your lordships were told that there is complete absence of access to justice. I am a judge in my own cause and my order is final. I'll demonstrate that, my lord, that to be not just misleading but false. Please come to page 12 of my written submissions where I have quoted 3C. Now, this is the identification. My lord, initial bill was that the collector would decide, because on land revenue laws, your lordships are aware, every state has a land revenue law, and the collector decides whether the government is the owner of the property or it's a private property. But the objection raised by many was that collector himself is the custodian in this district for the revenue purposes, for the purpose of government property. So he will be a judge in his own cause. That was the arguments against the collector being the adjudicator, and therefore it was suggested by JPC that let somebody else be the designated officer. Please have a look, my lord. Any government property identified or declared as Waqf property before or after the commencement of this act shall not be deemed to be a Waqf property. Now, 2, this will have to be read with 2. If any question arises as to whether any such property is a government property, the state government may by notification designate an officer above the rank of the collector, hereinafter referred to as the designated officer, who shall conduct an inquiry as per law and determine whether such property is a government property or not, and submit his report to the state government. Now, please see, provided that such property shall not be treated as Waqf property till the designated officer submits his report. I'll come to, my lord, what is the intent. If your lordship wants to delete this, please delete it. It's in their interest, my lord, that this provision is made. And I will demonstrate that.
So delete what entire section 3C.
No, 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 no. The proviso they were objecting to, the proviso.
But then, no, they are not only objecting to proviso, they are objecting to the entire section.
No, I said this when I read proviso, but I understand. No, they are not for entire section. 3, in case the designated officer determines the property to be a government property, he shall make necessary corrections in revenue record and submit a report in this regard to the government. The state government shall, on receipt of the report of the designated officer, direct the board, that is Waqf board, to make appropriate corrections in the record. My lord, the only consequence of the exercise undertaken by the designated officer under 3C will be that revenue record and the board record will be modified, will be corrected. Now, please come to, my lord, I will answer that question, my lord, but
What-
before I answer,
1 minute, first let the,
yes, I'm sorry.